The day I nearly died in a car accident should have brought my family together. Instead, my parents abandoned my newborn daughter when she needed them most. But just hours later, my grandfather walked through the hospital doors, carrying a decades-old secret that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. My name is Emma, and until 3 years ago, I believed family was the one thing you could always count on. I was wrong. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs were there all along. The favoritism, the coldness, the impossible standards. But when you're raised inside something, it becomes normal. You don't question it. My younger brother Ryan was the golden child. I was the disappointment. Ryan could crash Dad's truck into a mailbox at 16. And my parents would laugh it off as boys being boys. I could bring home straight A's, captain the debate team, and graduate near the top of my class. And all I'd hear was, "You could have worked harder." No matter what I accomplished, it was never enough. When I got accepted into a great university, my mother's first response wasn't congratulations. It was, "Ryan didn't get into a school like that. Try not to make him feel bad." I remember standing in the kitchen, holding my acceptance letter, waiting for someone to tell me they were proud. Nobody did. Instead, the conversation somehow became about protecting Ryan's feelings. That was my childhood. That was my life. By the time I turned 24, I had stopped expecting approval. Then I met Daniel, and everything changed. Daniel was kind in a way that almost felt suspicious at first. The first time I told him about my family dynamics, he listened quietly. When I finished, he asked, "Emma, when was the last time your parents told you they were proud of you?" I opened my mouth, then closed it, because I genuinely couldn't remember. Daniel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You deserve better." 3 simple words. I nearly cried right there in the restaurant. We got married 2 years later. My parents barely seemed interested. Mom spent most of the wedding complaining about seating arrangements. Dad left early because Ryan wanted help shopping for a motorcycle. Meanwhile, Daniel's parents danced with us, laughed with us, and treated me like I'd always belonged. For the first time in my life, I understood what unconditional love looked like. And that realization hurt more than I'd expected. Because once you've experienced genuine love, it's impossible to ignore its absence. A year after our wedding, I found out I was pregnant. Daniel cried. Actually cried. Then he spun me around the living room like we were in a movie. "I'm going to be a dad." His excitement was infectious. For weeks we planned everything. Names, nursery colors, future vacations, birthday traditions, the life we wanted to build. I hoped the baby might finally bring my parents closer. Maybe becoming grandparents would soften them. Maybe they'd see this as a fresh start. Maybe. I should have known better. When we told them the news, Mom's reaction was immediate. "Was this planned?" I laughed awkwardly. "Yes." She nodded, then asked, "Can you afford a child?" That was it. No congratulations. No excitement, just criticism. Dad seemed more interested in checking football scores on his phone. Ryan didn't even look up from his drink. The conversation moved on after less than 2 minutes. Daniel looked furious during the drive home. I stared out the window, pretending it didn't bother me. But it did. It always did. As my pregnancy progressed, the distance became impossible to ignore. Daniel's parents attended doctor appointments. My parents forgot due dates. Daniel's mom helped decorate the nursery. My mother complained that baby showers were a waste of money. Every milestone reminded me exactly where I stood in their priorities. And somehow, it still hurt, despite everything. Because no matter how old you get, part of you keeps hoping your parents will finally choose you. My daughter Lily was born on a rainy Tuesday morning. The moment they placed her in my arms, my entire world shifted. People always talk about love at first sight. I never fully believed it until I saw her. Tiny fingers, tiny nose, tiny perfect face. She yawned once and completely stole my heart. Daniel sat beside me crying again. She's beautiful. I smiled. No, she's perfect. For a while, life felt wonderful. Exhausting, chaotic, wonderful. Then reality returned. My parents visited exactly once. Lily was already 3 weeks old. Mom held her for less than 5 minutes. Dad spent most of the visit talking about Ryan's new business idea. When they left, Daniel looked at me carefully. You okay? I forced a smile. Yeah, I wasn't. But I was tired of being disappointed. Months passed. Lily grew. Daniel worked hard. I adjusted to motherhood. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. Then everything changed in a single afternoon. It happened when Lily was 6 months old. I remember every detail. The weather was clear. The roads were dry. The radio was playing softly. I was driving home after a pediatric appointment. Lily sat safely in the back seat. Then a truck ran a red light. I saw it. I slammed the brakes. I screamed. And then, impact. Metal exploded around us. Glass shattered. The world spun violently. Everything became noise. Pain dawned, darkness. When I opened my eyes, I couldn't move. Sirens echoed somewhere nearby. People were shouting. My head felt like it had been split open. My vision blurred. The first thing I thought about wasn't myself. It was Lily. Lily. My voice barely worked. Lily. A paramedic appeared beside me. Your daughter is alive. Alive. Thank God. Alive! I started crying immediately. Then, everything faded again. The next time I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Machines beeped around me. My entire body hurt. Daniel sat beside me. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying for hours. The moment he saw me awake, relief flooded his face. Oh my God! He grabbed my hand. I whispered, Lily, she's okay. I exhaled. The tension left my body instantly. She's okay, he repeated. Then something in his expression changed. A hesitation, a discomfort. I noticed immediately. What happened? Daniel looked away. That terrified me more than the accident. What happened? Silence. Then he finally spoke. After the crash, while doctors were treating you, we needed someone to stay with Lily for a few hours. I frowned. Okay. We called your parents. My stomach tightened. And Daniel's jaw clenched. We told them their granddaughter needed family. I stared at him. Something was wrong. Very wrong. What did they say? For a moment, Daniel didn't answer. Then he took a slow breath and quietly said, They refused. The room suddenly felt cold. What? They refused to come. I blinked. Surely I'd heard him wrong. What do you mean refused? Daniel looked absolutely disgusted. They said they already had dinner plans. I felt my chest tighten. No, I'm sorry. No. Daniel's eyes filled with anger. They knew you'd been in a serious accident. I couldn't process it. I genuinely couldn't. Parents could be selfish. Parents could be distant. But this? Their daughter was in the hospital. Their 6-month-old granddaughter needed help. And they chose dinner plans. I stared at the ceiling, numb. Then Daniel said something that made everything worse. Emma, that's not all. I slowly turned toward him. His face looked pale, almost shocked, as if he still couldn't believe what he'd heard. What else? Daniel swallowed, then quietly said, Your mother told me. Maybe this accident was a sign that some people weren't meant to have children. The world stopped. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't understand how a mother could say something like that. Not after a car accident. Not about her own daughter. Not about her granddaughter. Tears slid down my face. Daniel squeezed my hand, but there was nothing he could do, because some pain comes from realizing the truth. And the truth was simple. My parents never loved me the way parents should. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to process the cruelty of those words, the hospital room door suddenly opened. An elderly man stepped inside. His silver hair was slightly messy. His eyes were filled with concern, and in his hand was a thick brown envelope. My grandfather, the one person in my family who had always treated me differently, the one person who had always seemed to know things he never said out loud. He looked at me, then at Daniel, then at baby Lily sleeping nearby. His expression hardened. I just spoke to your parents. Something in his voice sent a chill down my spine. Because Grandpa wasn't angry. He was furious. And before either of us could say a word, he placed the envelope on my hospital bed and said, "Emma, it's time you learned why they've treated you differently your entire life." I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, and then Grandpa uttered 7 words that changed everything. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The steady beeping of the hospital monitors seemed unnaturally loud. I stared at the thick brown envelope lying across my blanket. My grandfather stood beside the bed, his expression darker than I had ever seen. Daniel looked between us. Finally, I found my voice. "What are you talking about?" Grandpa didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled a chair closer and sat down. His hands trembled slightly. That scared me, because my grandfather was the strongest person I knew. Even at 81 years old, he was the kind of man who fixed his own roof, shoveled his own driveway, and refused help carrying groceries. Seeing him nervous felt wrong, very wrong. "Grandpa," he looked directly into my eyes. "Before I tell you anything, I need you to understand something." I swallowed hard. "Okay. I never wanted you to find out like this." The room suddenly felt smaller. "But after what your parents did today," his jaw tightened. "I can't stay silent anymore." Daniel moved closer. "What is it?" Grandpa slowly opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, documents, old letters, legal papers, things that looked decades old. My pulse accelerated. "Grandpa, you're scaring me." His eyes softened. "I'm sorry, sweetheart." Then he pulled out a faded photograph. A woman stood smiling beside a lake. She looked maybe 25, dark hair, kind eyes, beautiful smile. I had never seen her before. "Who is that?" Grandpa stared at the picture. For a moment I thought he might cry. Then he quietly said, "That's your mother." I frowned. "What?" He nodded. "Your real mother." The air disappeared from my lungs. Everything inside me froze. "What?" Daniel looked just as shocked. The room fell silent. I stared at Grandpa, then the photograph, then Grandpa again. "No." My voice sounded weak, confused. "No. My mother is Susan." Grandpa slowly shook his head. "No." I felt dizzy. "What are you saying?" The old man closed his eyes, as if reliving a painful memory. Then he began. 28 years ago, my daughter Claire got pregnant. I looked at the photograph again. The woman by the lake. Claire, my real mother. She was young. His voice cracked, but she was excited. He smiled sadly. "She talked about you every day before you were born." My heart pounded violently. "You?" He nodded. "Yes." I couldn't breathe. Grandpa continued. "Your father left before you were born." I looked down. The room spinning slightly. "Claire planned to raise you herself." He paused. "But when you were 6 months old, tragedy struck." I felt sick. "What happened?" Grandpa stared at the floor. "There was an accident." My stomach dropped. The word accident suddenly felt cursed. "A drunk driver." His voice broke. "She didn't survive." Tears filled his eyes. I had never seen my grandfather cry before. Never. The sight shattered something inside me. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He nodded slowly. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then I asked the question burning inside my head. If she was my mother, I looked up. Then who are Susan and Robert? Grandpa's face darkened. My son and daughter-in-law. I blinked. Then realization hit. Hard. Robert. My father. No, not my father. My uncle. Susan. Not my mother. My aunt. The room tilted. I grabbed the bed rail. Oh my God. Daniel looked stunned. Oh my God. Grandpa nodded. They adopted you after Claire died. Silence. Pure silence. Every childhood memory flashed through my mind. Every moment. Every rejection. Every comparison. Every cruel comment. Every time Ryan had been chosen over me. Everything suddenly looked different. What happened? I whispered. Grandpa understood the question immediately. Why? Why had they treated me differently? Why had they never loved me? Why had I always felt like an outsider? His shoulders slumped. They never wanted another child. The words hit like a punch. My chest tightened. What? Robert agreed because Claire was his sister. Grandpa looked exhausted. Susan never wanted the responsibility. I felt tears running down my face. All those years. All those birthdays. All those family dinners. All those holidays. And she never wanted me there. Grandpa continued. They promised they'd raise you as their own. His expression hardened. I believed them. The guilt in his voice was heartbreaking. But none of this was his fault. None of it. Then another question appeared. A terrifying one. Does Ryan know? Grandpa looked away. That answered everything. My stomach dropped. He knows. The old man nodded. The room went silent. I stared at him, unable to process it. Ryan knew. My entire life. He knew. The golden child. The favorite. The brother who never defended me. The brother who watched me get treated differently. He knew exactly why, and never told me. A fresh wave of betrayal crashed over me. Daniel looked furious. He knew and said nothing. Grandpa nodded. Since he was 16. I closed my eyes. The pain was almost unbearable. Not because strangers had lied, because family had. The people I trusted most. The people who looked me in the eye every holiday and pretended. 27 years. 27 years of lies. Then, Grandpa pulled another document from the envelope. This is the second reason I came. I opened my eyes. The second reason, what could possibly be worse? He handed me the paper. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw the heading. Trust agreement. My heart skipped. I looked up. What's this? Grandpa took a deep breath. Your mother. Claire. My real mother. She had a life insurance policy. I stared at him. And he hesitated. Then said, the money was placed in a trust for you. My pulse accelerated. How much? His expression became grim. A lot. I waited. Then he finally answered. Over $3 million. The room exploded into silence. $3 million. $3 million. I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. Daniel looked stunned. I looked stunned. Everyone looked stunned. What? Grandpa nodded. The trust was supposed to transfer to you on your 25th birthday. I stared. I'm 27. His eyes darkened. I know. A horrible feeling settled in my stomach, the kind that arrives before bad news. What happened? Grandpa slowly looked away, and that's when I knew whatever came next would be ugly. Very ugly. They told me the money was gone. My heart stopped. What? They claimed expenses. The old man looked disgusted. Education. Medical costs. Raising you. My entire body went cold. No, no, no. They spent it. Grandpa nodded. They spent almost all of it. The room became completely silent. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. $3 million. Money left by my mother. Money intended for me. Gone. And suddenly everything made sense. Every expensive vacation Ryan took, the luxury truck, the business investments, the huge home renovation, the constant spending, the money had come from somewhere. Now I knew where. My inheritance, my future, my mother's final gift, gone, stolen. Daniel stood up so quickly, his chair nearly tipped over. They stole from her. Grandpa nodded. Yes, I felt physically sick. Years of neglect, years of lies, and now this. But Grandpa wasn't finished, because the look on his face told me there was more, much more. Then he reached into the envelope one final time and removed a folded letter. The paper looked old, yellowed, fragile, carefully preserved. What is that? His eyes filled with tears. Your mother's last letter. My heart shattered. I stared at the paper, unable to move, unable to speak. A letter. From the woman who gave birth to me. The woman I'd never known. The woman whose face I had only seen minutes earlier. My hands shook as I accepted it. Across the top were 3 words written in fading blue ink. For my daughter. I immediately started crying. Grandpa reached over and squeezed my shoulder. Read it. Slowly, I unfolded the paper. The first sentence nearly destroyed me. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you myself how much I love you. I covered my mouth, sobbing. The room blurred. Years of loneliness. Years of wondering why I wasn't enough. Years of believing something was wrong with me. And suddenly, a woman I had never met was telling me exactly what I'd needed to hear my entire life. I kept reading, and then I reached a paragraph that made my blood run cold. Because my mother had written something I never expected. Something that suggested she had been afraid long before the accident. Something that hinted her death may not have been as simple as everyone claimed. I looked up at Grandpa, terrified, confused. Grandpa. He already knew. His expression said everything. What is it? Daniel asked. My hands trembled. I looked back at the letter, then read the final line aloud, and every person in the room froze. Because, written in my mother's own handwriting were the words, my uncle, the man I had called Dad for 27 years, the man who had stolen my inheritance, the man who knew exactly who I was, the man who had hidden the truth. And suddenly one terrifying question entered my mind, and again. Each time it felt heavier, more terrifying, more impossible. My hands trembled as I stared at the letter. Across from me, Daniel looked stunned. Grandpa remained silent. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, I managed to ask the question. Did my mother think Robert would hurt her? Grandpa sighed deeply, the kind of sigh that comes from carrying a burden for years. I don't know. That wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was honest. I wish I knew. I looked down at the letter. A woman I had never met was suddenly the most important person in my life, and she had left me a warning, not a request, not advice, a warning. The distinction mattered. A lot. Tell me everything. Grandpa nodded slowly. Then he began. 3 months after my mother's death, the family accepted the official explanation. A drunk driver crossed the center line. A collision occurred. Claire died instantly. Case closed. At least officially. But Grandpa never fully believed it. There were things that bothered me. His voice was quiet. Like what? He hesitated, then answered. The timing. I frowned. What do you mean? Grandpa leaned forward. 2 weeks before the accident, Claire called me. I listened carefully. She sounded scared. A chill ran through me. Scared of what? She wouldn't say. His eyes narrowed. But she kept asking strange questions. What questions? Questions about legal documents. My pulse accelerated. Trusts. Inheritance. Guardianship. I exchanged a glance with Daniel. Neither of us liked where this was going. She asked who would control her money if something happened to her. I swallowed hard. And I told her it would go to whoever legally raised you. The room became quiet. Then Grandpa continued. She sounded upset. A knot formed in my stomach. Why? He slowly shook his head. I never found out. Then came another detail. One that felt important. Very important. The day before the accident, she called again. I sat upright. What happened? Grandpa's eyes darkened. She asked if she could come stay with me. The room froze. What? He nodded. She said she needed time to think. My heart pounded. About what? I don't know. Then he added something that made my blood run cold. She never arrived. Silence. Pure silence. The implications were terrifying, but there was still no proof. Only questions, only suspicion, only a daughter's desperate hope for answers. Then Grandpa reached into his pocket. I wasn't sure whether to show you this. My stomach dropped. There was more. Of course there was. There always was. He pulled out a small key, old silver, worn with age. I stared at it. What is that? A storage unit key. I blinked. What storage unit? Grandpa looked directly at me. Your mother's. The room went completely silent. What? I found it among her belongings after she died. My heart nearly stopped. You never opened it? He shook his head. No. Why? Because I didn't know it existed until years later. Daniel frowned. Years later? Grandpa nodded. It was hidden inside an old jewelry box. My pulse accelerated. What's inside? He gave a slow answer. I have absolutely no idea. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. My injuries would heal. The emotional damage was another story. The first thing we did wasn't go home. We drove directly to the storage facility. The entire ride felt surreal. Part of me was terrified. Part of me was excited. Part of me wondered if opening that unit would answer everything or make everything worse. The facility manager verified our paperwork, then led us through rows of metal doors. Finally, we stopped. Unit 314. The manager walked away. I stared at the lock, my mother's lock, my mother's storage unit, my mother's secrets. For a moment, I couldn't move. Daniel gently squeezed my hand. You ready? No, not even close, but I nodded anyway. The key slid smoothly into the lock. The door rolled upward, and all three of us froze. The unit wasn't full of furniture. It wasn't full of boxes. It wasn't full of junk. It was full of files. Hundreds of files. Organized, labeled, catalogued. My mother had been documenting something for years. Grandpa looked shocked. Daniel looked shocked. I felt sick. We entered carefully. Then I noticed a box sitting alone on a table. Across the top were 5 handwritten words. Tears immediately filled my eyes. I slowly opened it. Inside was a video recorder, several journals, photographs, and dozens of sealed envelopes. I grabbed the first journal, opened it, and began reading. Within minutes, everything changed. Again, the journals revealed a truth none of us expected. My mother wasn't afraid someone would kill her. She was afraid someone would steal from her, specifically Robert, my uncle, the man I'd called Dad. According to her journals, Robert had accumulated massive debts, failed investments, loans, credit problems, hidden financial disasters, things nobody knew about, not even Grandpa. My mother had discovered everything, and she was terrified because Robert had started pressuring her for money. Large amounts of money, again and again. The journals documented every conversation, every request, every argument, every threat. Then came the final entry, written 3 days before her death. I read it aloud, my voice shaking. Robert says, "Family helps family." But I don't trust him anymore. If something happens to me, I want Emma protected. I want her future protected. Grandpa closed his eyes. Daniel cursed under his breath. I kept reading. Tomorrow I'm meeting an attorney. That attorney meeting never happened, because the accident occurred first. But the journals confirmed something important. My mother's death had not been part of a conspiracy. The drunk driver was real. The crash was real. The investigation was legitimate. She had not been murdered, but she had correctly predicted something else. Robert would eventually take what wasn't his, and he did. Over the following weeks, attorneys became involved. Very serious attorneys, the kind who specialized in financial fraud, trust violations, estate theft, inheritance disputes. The deeper they investigated, the uglier things became. Robert and Susan hadn't merely borrowed money, they had systematically drained the trust for years, using loopholes, false expenses, questionable paperwork, unauthorized withdrawals. The total amount shocked everyone. More than $2 million had disappeared. Money intended for me. Money intended for my future. Money intended by my mother. The evidence was overwhelming. There was nowhere for them to hide, nowhere to run, nowhere to lie, and for the first time in my life, they were finally being held accountable. Then came the confrontation, the one I had imagined 1,000 times, the one I had feared my entire life. Robert, Susan, Ryan, all sitting across from me. No more secrets, no more lies, no more pretending. I placed the journals on the table, the trust documents beside them, the attorney's report on top. Nobody spoke. Then Robert finally said, "You don't understand." I laughed. For the first time in my life, actually laughed. Understand what? His face tightened. We raised you. The old guilt, the old manipulation, the old weapon. Except it no longer worked. I looked directly into his eyes. No, his expression changed. You tolerated me. Silence. I continued. You raised Ryan. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody argued. Because they knew it was true. Every word. Every painful word. Then Susan started crying. But something inside me had changed. For years I would have comforted her, apologized, made excuses. Not anymore. You stole from me. She looked away. You lied to me. More silence. You let me believe I wasn't good enough. Ryan finally spoke. Emma, I turned toward him. He immediately stopped talking. Because he knew exactly what I'd say. You knew. His face crumpled. The shame was obvious. You knew the entire time. He couldn't deny it because there was nothing left to deny. And honestly, that hurt more than anything. More than the money, more than the lies, more than the betrayal. Because brothers are supposed to protect each other. He never did. The legal battle lasted nearly a year. In the end, the courts ruled heavily in my favor. Properties were sold. Assets were seized. Accounts were frozen. The remaining trust funds were recovered. Not all of it, but enough. More importantly, the truth was recovered, and that mattered far more. A year later, my life looked completely different. Daniel and I purchased a beautiful home, not because we suddenly became wealthy, but because we finally had stability, peace, freedom. Lily was thriving, healthy, happy, loved. Every day I looked at her and made myself a promise. The cycle ends here. No favorites, no emotional neglect, No conditional love. No child wondering whether they're enough. Because she already was. Exactly as she was, one afternoon, Grandpa sat on our back porch, watching Lily play. The sunlight reflected off the lake behind our house. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. You know what Claire would have loved? I looked at him. What? He pointed toward Lily. That. I followed his gaze. My daughter was laughing, running through the grass. Completely carefree. Completely loved. Tears filled my eyes, because for the first time, I finally understood something. My mother hadn't failed me. She'd tried to protect me, even after she was gone, through letters, through trusts, through warnings, through love, and somehow. Love had found its way to me anyway. A few months later, I framed the photograph of Claire by the lake. It sits in my living room today. Every morning I walk past it. Every morning I smile. And every morning I remember the lesson that changed my life. The people who raise you may shape your childhood, but they do not define your worth. Real family isn't determined by blood, obligation, or shared last names. Real family is revealed by who stands beside you when life falls apart. And sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't money at all. It's finally discovering the truth about who loved you from the very beginning.